We're moving sort of fast at the end of the semester here, and I don't want to throw a great deal more at you. And I'm not sure if you'll end up using animation in any of your presentations, but I'd like to let you know what's available. We've dealt with making the building, we've done with setting up the views and lighting it. Now we're sort of adding moving through the space instead of just picking one particular camera location to look from. And there are a couple of different ways to do that in Revit. I'm going to go to my level 1 plan. And the first thing I like to do is just use the walk tool in our navigation wheel to be able to move through a space like this. And the first thing we do is set up a 3D view, and then we start walking around within that. So I'm just going to set up a camera, view, 3D view, camera, and I'm just going to start sort of right here by the front door and look, say, diagonally across that first room. One thing I can see here is that there's part of the outside of the building I can't see yet because it's my clipping plane only sort of goes back to here on the plan. If we uncheck far clip active, then we'll see. Well, I guess yeah. Then we'll see out to the edge of the building. So these are the exterior columns. So the way the walk tool works, we use Shift W and pick the walk tool. And then as you hold that down and drag it slowly, the camera will move in the direction where you go. So you can just sort of aim the higher up your cursor is, the faster it goes, the farther back, the slower. So you can sort of stop and then turn, move forward. It takes some getting used to, but it's a good way to sort of think about what your eventual animation sequences might be like, to be able to sort of get a feel for how places look. But I would like to add to this idea also being able to use the visual styles with the materials and textures and color. So let's create a new view again, 3D view, camera, here again. Far clip active, turn that off. And I'm going to start just by turning shadows on. So we can do that a couple of different places, actually. Let's go to graphic display options. And under shadows, turn cast shadows on. So we can see the sunlight coming into the building. And since we're looking sort of off to the west here, let's have it coming in from the west, which we can do here in our lighting tab. Done this before. And I want to uncheck this so we can set the sun direction relative to north. And let's just say that the angle it's coming in, 270 would be straight west. Let's make it 260 just to be a little different from that. So that'll be coming sort of in like this, or actually up a little bit. And then let's do the altitude be like 25 degrees, which would be low enough to come in here underneath the overhang of the building. So 260 and 25 should be okay. Apply. Okay, apply. So there's that. That's not coming in far enough for me. I want it to come in much farther. So let's go back to sun settings and change this to 15 degrees, like almost at sunset. Okay. Okay. Okay, so that gives us some drama to our view, that we have a sense of what's going on here, sort of where the building is in space. So let's use the Shift W just to walk down the hall and come back in here again and see what's going on. Shift W. We go this way this time. And you notice for this one, we don't get the shadows while we're doing it. That would really slow the program down. But we can see it at any time we pick the mouse back up off the walk button. And I don't know what else you've all put in here. I haven't done any furniture or anything. Get a sense for how that all looks. And now to turn, I'm not moving my cursor up, my mouse up at all. I'm just moving it sideways, just to rotate my view. Like I'm on a tripod, just spinning it around. I'll go back in the other direction where we came from. Okay, you can see how that works. So we've got a building and some light. Let's add our materials to that and go into visual styles, and let's just go right to realistic as long as we're at it. And we can continue to move through the space that way. Is this a good pace for doing stuff for people? Is that working out okay? I practice a little bit, so I'll keep it slow. If you want to be working with a client to explain things, how spaces interrelate, this is sort of a nice way to do that. With the animations that we'll get to later in the talk, you're pretty much presenting a canned path of travel, but this will let you sort of go anywhere and explain anything that you want to do, or for you to explore your own project and get to know it better. Oh, and I guess this is the sun reflecting on the lights or something. And then pulling back the mouse down it does make you go in fact backwards, sort of outside the building. Whew, we're back through the glass. Let's do a little something in terms of the background, just so we're not sort of floating in space here. Again, since this is not a rendered view, rendering settings won't show up, but anything that we can do in graphic display options that we address for still images will show up in terms of a background. Right now there's none. Let's use the one called sky, because that's going to give us an option for a ground plane as well as the sky that Revit generates. So the sky is going to do the sky all by itself, but we get to choose the ground color. And I like to let's use a dark muted green somewhere down here in the bottom, and then drag down here. So somewhere down in there and somewhere dark. The sun will be shining on it, so it's going to be pretty. It'll be lighter than this looks. But if we do it up here, we're gonna get this bright green stuff that just looks terrible. So I'm gonna mute that down, sort of slide this from the vibrant green down into the gray green area down here. Okay. Okay. So that's respectable. So at least we now can feel where the building is in space, even if we haven't put in a city or something or other like that. We still have a sense of horizon and vanishing points and stuff. Let's dress up the building a little bit. If you go back to your site plan, let's put a bunch of trees around the whole building. And you can get really crummy sort of 3D made trees, but Revit also provides something called an RPC tree, which is for rich photorealistic content. And we can do that with CM. It's just a component, architecture component, place component. And down here towards the end, we have a bunch of trees with their approximate heights. And these are basically photographs taken all around a tree, so we can see it from a bunch of different directions, but it's somehow magically turned into one thing. I have no idea how it happens. So let's just pick a Japanese cherry, I don't know, and put a couple of them out here. I know they aren't really here, but it'll give us a sense of an environment. And some others. I really don't know much about plants, so whatever you want. Let's just get like 10 or 12 trees around there just to see them. There are some on the Belvedere after all. And go back to our level 1 plan. So now we can go back to the view that we created, our last view, which should be the last 3D view here with a number on it. And if you're aiming in anything like the right direction, you should be able to see one or more of those trees. They just help add to the look of things. I'm going to do Shift W and take a little closer look at them. Okay, well, they sit there, in actual fact, they'd be in a planter or something or other, but Here we are. Oh, one thing, as long as we're doing this, you can see how sort of disorienting it is to sort of smack through something. We're going to be, going through glass, I guess, as we do this, and it's a little easier on the viewer to go through glass than it is to go through through walls and things. So just bear that in mind when we're doing our animation sequences. It's just distracting to have that going on. Where am I? I want to be over here. Now I'll turn around back to my original there. Okay. So there's that. And in all of these, of course, we can decide to rotate. We can decide to look. We can do up down. Here we are between the ceiling and the floor above. Here we are on the next floor up. So up down really has quite a tool, but we're going to stay down here for now. What will these others do? Rewind gives us a whole. I don't know how far it goes. Anyway, there's that if you want to do it. What we've been doing is just doing this live, moving wherever we want. But if we want to insert a animation sequence into a PowerPoint presentation or to show it during your final review or something, we need to save that as an external file, like an MP4 or something that we can then play or email to people, whatever it happens to be. So to do this, let's go back into our floor plan. So instead of a still view, if we put a camera in here, aim in here, we just get this one view. What we're going to do when we go to view, 3D view, walkthrough, little feet, is to create a series of points. I just picked that same thing that will define what are called the keyframes of an animation sequence. So let's just see what that looks like. And this will be a new view. It'll show up under a new walkthrough heading once we create it. And initially, it will also be in just a hidden line mode. It's a view to which we will then add light and materials and sun and that kind of stuff. This is all still under the View tab. There's a progression from 3D ortho view to 3D perspective view to 3D moving perspective view. I'm going to start here. And we're just doing these like every 20 or 30 feet. I'm going to click here and say I want to go over here and say I want to go over here and sort of bend back around and end up facing where I was starting. So that's like 5 or 6 clicks. And then when I finish with those, I'm going to finish the walkthrough. So I'll just do that again. 3D view, walkthrough, click once, click again, just sort of indicate my path. I'm trying not to make any tight turns. And when I've got there, I say finish walkthrough. Sort of an odd looking thing there. Let's go back for a minute to the last view we used, the Shift W navigation wheel on 3D View 11, which we used to navigate in. The walkthrough created a whole new kind of view in the project browser. And let me get rid of that one that I did first and go to the most recent one, walkthrough number 2. The initial view of that we see is going to be where the last camera was. So I'm sort of coming back into that space that I had initially created. So the trick here, this is a whole new thing, whole new dimension of things, is when we select that view on an edge, then we get the option to edit this walkthrough. And then we get a whole new menu here. And the key concept here is that those, 7 or 8 points or whatever that I indicated are known as the key frames of the walkthrough. And that comes from, like Disney animation, where the master animator would show what the figure or scene needed to look like every 4 or 5 seconds. And then the people called in-betweeners would come in and do the 24 frames a second stills between them. But I want to, so this is actually the last frame of that walkthrough. I want to click through previous keyframe and keep doing that frame by frame until I get to the beginning of that view, which is back to here. Then, once we're back at the beginning, we can hit the play button, and it's going to take us very quickly along that path. As it's very quick because in a hidden line mode, it doesn't have to do much thinking about each individual frame. So I'm just going to hit play, and it's going to then just zoom on its own. Yeah, and back to that last frame, and then click back to the beginning of this. Let's just do it one more time just to see what we're doing. And something to notice here is that the camera is always aiming in the direction that it's going. There's no sense of the camera moving in one direction but looking off to the right or to the left or whatever. We're just sort of, it's almost as if we had a camera fixed to our head as we walked through the space. It's always in looking straight ahead. Let's go to graphic display options and turn lighting on. And since this is a new view, we'll have to set the lighting up for it. I think I said 260 and 15. Apply. Okay. Okay. Oh, I haven't turned shadows on yet. That's what I hadn't done. So we have the idea of the sun, but we have to say use the sun, apply. Okay. And there's another kind of shadow we can use called ambient shadows, which are often real handy for this. It gives a better sense of sort of environmental lighting for this. I don't even know how those are generated, but they look about right for what we're looking at. So let's say okay, and then let's play this view. Play the view with this. Well, it'll be slower because it's got to think more about what to do with each pixel instead of just being white. But still pretty quick. Seeing the distant objects, the trees, pop into view suddenly is a clue that I don't have far clip active turned off yet. And I know these seem quick. When we finally get around to saving this to disk, we get to tell it how long we want that whole sequence to take. We want to take 5 seconds or 30 seconds, whatever that happens to be. So we don't have to worry about it being fast right now. In fact, we want it fast just so we can see it. Let's turn materials on. Realistic. And I think here we're going to see some slowdown because there's just that much more to think about. But let's see how that works. And what you can see is sort of the jerky motion is like each frame of this movie being generated and then played, and then the next one's generated and then displayed, and like that. And putting together the animation, once we get to that point of writing this to disk, we need to turn on a ground plane out there. And this is slowing down, I think, because of the multiple levels of transparency. It has to think about like what is outside. It's got to go through 2 pieces of glass to get there. So there's that. Let's go into graphic display options and turn the background on just to repeat that. Sky, dark green. Okay. Apply. Okay. And then I forgot on this one to turn off far clip active again. We want to make sure we do that so we don't accidentally get rid of the trees. Yeah, here it is out here. See, with that checked, we lose the stuff that's outside. This is not really physically there, so it still appears generated by Revit, but the things that are actually out there, we need to be sure we have that clip plane far enough away to be able to see them. one last time. Play it. Trees, background, sky, materials, lights. That's about all we really need to see at this stage. And it's something that's not available. You know, we dealt with cloud rendering in the video about cloud rendering, but animation is not available there. It would just take up too much time of people, too much computer time of that. So any animations that we do are going to be on your own computer on your own time. Okay, let me think here. This will be interesting. Let me turn these off. Keep just my walkthrough and the floor plan. I'm going to split the screen with window tile, and ZA will zoom both windows to fill their screen as best we can. So I think now as I play this, we can see it happening over here. We can see the camera moving in plan as we go through this. Let me just try to, there it is. When we select the view here, when we select the walkthrough here, it's selected over here as well. And then if we go to edit walkthrough and play, we'll be able to see it moving through here, the final result, as well as moving through here where the camera is. Let's just take a look at that. Play. Yeah. And what you can see on the screen over here on the plan view is we can see for each of these frames, there's a camera point and a target point. We can, for the keyframes, re-aim where the target is aiming if we want to smooth things out a little bit or sort of anticipate a turn before we get there. But I think I'll sort of wait on that for a while. Anyway, so that's what that's doing. You can see here, like if we're running into furniture or would like to move this over so we go through a door and not through a wall, we can sort of understand what's going on over here that way. Okay, we can get rid of the plan view now. So the next thing to do is to save this sequence as an actual animation file that we can play outside of Revit. And let's just do that. What we do, we go to File. Actually, I'm going to save this right now, just so we have it. Saving my American Life building, that is. So to export this animation view, we go to File, Export. We have to scroll down, hit this little button down here, Images and Animations, and we're going to save a walkthrough, where we have the first of many choices to start making. And the first will be how long do we want this whole thing to last? And I think what we're going to do is say, we're just going to accept all the defaults right now. We're not going to make any changes at all, but just we'll see what's going to happen. Basically, that means we're going to be able to see this when it's played back on the screen just by double clicking the animation file once it's created. It'll be 15 frames a second, which will be a little jerky. And there are 300 of them, so it'll last for 20 seconds. The visual style will be realistic with edges. And I think eventually we want to turn edges off because we don't, in the real world, we don't see edges. We don't see black lines around things. We just see where two planes come together. And we'll do with these, we'll keep these dimensions and all that and just say, okay. And then we get a place of where do we want to save this file. And for right now, I'm just going to stick it on my desktop so I can find it again. You would normally stick this in your project folder. So stick it on my desktop. And I'm not even going to deal with options. I'm just going to say save. file name. File name documents. That's weird. File name, we'll call this ALB01. Capital ALB. So it's going to be on my desktop called ALB01. Save. And let's just accept all these defaults. This will be a bigger file than we need, but I don't want to change anything just to start with. And now it starts creating the animation frame by frame for 300 frames and writing each one to disk, one after the other, into an animation file. And we'll do this again before we finish. But you can see it's thinking about, basically it's thinking about each frame, and then just like in a movie, it's appending one frame to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next to make what's called an AVI file, which is short for audio visual interface or something along those lines. So this is taking, like a second per frame. One of the options we'll get to is to be able to render this image frame by frame, but that might take a couple of minutes per frame, and it will quickly get take a very, very long time. So address that in this talk, just to tell you that when I'm rendering with Revit, I never animating with Revit, I really never use the render option. It just takes too long. But you see, we've got our light, our materials, our background, our sky, and our trees here. I'm just going to let it go through to completion here. Is this working for people? Working out? Okay. And I think as we go back through this, I'm going to try not to render it, I'm going to try not to animate, write it to disk that many times, because it's obviously going to take, 5 minutes or something rather, while we're just sitting around. And I tell you, it's nice having a faster computer now. When I started doing this in the 20 years ago, I would sleep on the floor at the office just because I realized, okay, this will be done at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then I need to save it and start another one to be done by 9 o'clock. And it was not a good way to live. So the things that we'll be thinking about as we go back into this are, what do we want the screen proportions to be? I mean, if you want this full frame on a computer these days, it's usually 1920 pixels wide and 1080 pixels high. That's the 1080p format. So we'll need to think about proportions. We'll need to think about how fast we want it to happen. What we'll do, once we save this, we'll play it and see if 20 seconds seems like a approximately good time for that walkthrough, or does that make it feel like we're running or dawdling, and adjust the number of frames and the time to make that work out more like let's say, a relatively fast stroll through the place instead of a dash or a lag-in. Usually it errs on the side of starting out being too fast. So do you know that today is the U of L's birthday? It was founded April 3rd, 1798. not as the University of Louisville, but as like the Louisville College or something along those lines. And eventually I think it was private at that point, and then the city acquired it and renamed it somewhere over the course of the intervening centuries. But that's something. How long is that? 17 to 225 years, something like that. Happy birthday, U of L. It's rendering this to be, I think one of those settings was 576 pixels wide and 384 tall or something or other. So even though we're seeing it bigger on the screen, it's actually rendering it to a smaller frame. It still might go faster if it were smaller on the screen. Just wouldn't have to. I'm not sure of the ins and outs of that. Is anybody else finished? Somebody last year had a screaming fast computer, and I'd be doing the demonstration in class. 1,000, 1,000, and she'd be done. What's the problem here? And even though this is not rendered, we're still getting reflections of the obviously of the sun. We're getting reflections of the ground plane there in the mullions. It's fairly sophisticated stuff going on, which it's much better than what the realistic style is actually fairly new. Um, Sort of the most we used to be able to get was just shaded with textures, but not a real good sense of light reflecting off things. Getting there. Okay, done. Okay, and at this point, well, I'll play this while you guys are continuing to render. I'm just going to play the ALB01 AVI file. So this seems pretty fast to me. That's like running through the space. And there are a couple of things I don't like about it. One is that we see these black lines, so we'll need to turn those off. And another is even once they're turned off on these, where we do have things at an angle, we're going to get sort of the jagged stair-step pixelated edges. Well, that's called aliasing, the sort of stepness. And anti-aliasing will smooth that out so we don't get things like this happening here and here on the door. But mostly I like it to take longer so it doesn't feel like we're sprinting through the space. If you printed or have available the PDF on page 4, it's talking about how to take this and make it look as good as we can get without actually rendering each frame, which is just going to take too long. So I'm going to close this out. Close that down. I'm not going to make any changes to the frame, to the image itself right now. But let's change this view in graph display options to uncheck show edges. So realistic mode will still be there. Uncheck show edges. I want to check smooth lines with anti-aliasing, where if I had a black wall and a white wall and a black wall and a white ceiling that were joined at an angle here on the screen, Revit would use some very carefully put in gray dots in the middle to make it look as though it's a smooth line instead of one that goes up and down, black, white, black, white. We'll see how it looks. So that's all the same. That's the only changing I'm going to do there and apply that to this view. Okay, so we see we got no lines. When we go to writing it to disk, let's make sure I got that. Realistic visual style, edges turned off, lines smooth with anti-aliasing, cast shadows and ambient shadows turned on. But one thing I want to do is I want to change the proportions of this image to match a 16 by 9 screen, which is the typical proportions of a laptop screen. And that's just our regular size crop up here. So we pick it, pick size crop, and 16 by 9 is the same as 8 by 4.5. So I'll do 8 inches by 4.5 inches, which will make it a longer, wider view that is a standard format for animation sequences these days. So now that I've got everything sort of set in the model, I'm going to Control S just to remember these. This looks pretty good. You know that? I mean, this, you know, you start putting the marble on there and it's like, how far do we have to go? So if we go to File Export again, Export, scroll down, walk through. It was pretty jerky, just racing through when we were moving through it before. I'm going to change this. I need to make my time longer so that I'm walking more slowly through this space. I need more frames. I picked the walkthrough, went to Edit Walkthrough, went to here to pick frames, and it gives me frame information. And I'm going to say, it's going to take a while, 500. We'll say 450 at 24 frames a second. So that'll still take about 20 seconds. Yeah, let's make it 500. We can speed the camera up or slow it down. I'm not going to do that. Apply. So with 500 frames, I'm going to go to Export, Animations, Walkthrough. So it's picked up that information, all frames. I could do a frame range, you know, just like, well, that's an interesting possibility. But I'm not, for right now, not change too much. So this is going to go smoother, but still going to be fast. My dimensions are now pretty close to this 768 by 432 is this proportions now. Realistic. Yeah, really not realistic with edges, just realistic. I'll say OK. And we'll say ALB 02, 500 frames, 24 frames per second, just to remember what I'm doing there. And I'll go to save. And again, I'll do this full frames uncompressed. Well, there's some options there where we can make our ultimate file smaller, but this is fine for now. And you see, we don't have any black lines, and we've got really nice smooth tops to those things that are angled. But you can see that as we're asking Revit to do more and more in each frame, it's taking longer and longer for each frame. And I don't know if there's a little counter here. Oh, down at the bottom, it's saying how many I've done. Walkthrough 2, that's this guy over here, 33 of 500 frames, so that's elapsed time, something or other. So as you can tell, this is something that you're not going to want to do over and over and over and over and over again. You know, we sort of want to get it good. If you get your keyframes, well, basically all the keyframes inherit the visual style settings of the original view. And then you can go into edit the walkthrough and just go from keyframe to keyframe and see if those are what you want in terms of what the camera is looking at each keyframe. complete the animation a relatively few number of times. This is really taking way too long. Well, we're a sixth of the way through. We'll just deal with it. And something you will find is that there's simply no the better it looks, the longer it's going to take to get there in terms of time per image or and as we'll see towards the end of my talk, I want to show you what an add-on program called Enscape can do. Good student price. It's about $12 a month if you just want to do it on a monthly basis. And it can do much better images than this, but you also require that your computer has a higher end graphics card from NVIDIA or AMD to do that. Well, this is a little painful, just sitting here waiting for the paint to dry. We're a quarter of the way through. Well, let's take the time to be looking at this image to see what else we might want to do. If you knew you were going to be doing this, your first floor, you might think about how else to. I mean, regardless of what you're doing inside the building, is there anything else you want to do, like getting a hint of the Belvedere? Um, uh, there are some backgrounds you can buy that. Oh, actually, they're available in the cloud rendering, although not for animations, where an image is provided that essentially is around your whole site. So you can make it look as though you're in the middle of the field or in the middle of a city or on a seaport or something. And no matter what direction you look, there's content there. I mean, houses or buildings or farms or trees or whatever. But that's not available here for Revit's own rendering here on the desktop. Animating on the desktop. The advantage of this kind of rendering here, just with render, view walkthrough, and then exporting, is that it doesn't take any high-end graphics hardware in your computer. This is your little CPU just calculating this pixel by pixel, and a slower computer will take longer, but it can still be done. Getting there, halfway there. Oh, there's the sun itself. Look at that. Up on top of that tree. So, what's going on in your lives? Any further excitements on the studio front, or where's that shaping up?
We're working on putting our stairs into the penthouse, is what we did this morning.
Something that concerns me is if you know, the studio projects are supposed to demonstrate what we've learned, what you guys have learned in the course of your studies, especially code and stuff. And I'm just wondering how that's going to sit with either your sort of the jurors, the critics who are there for your final reviews, or with CETA, with just having one staircase out of this fourth, actually even out of the second floor. You're supposed to have two ways out that don't include elevators. You know, there really should be two staircases there, but there aren't. And I don't know if that was acceptable in, when was this built, 75? I think so. But it's a, so somebody could get sort of, I mean, I think it's a problem that Keith didn't, as a newcomer to town, didn't know about that many different buildings in town to pick one that's really appropriate. We could put a fire escape out the outside of the building. That would be a different kind of look. So I think what we're going to end up with here is a faster, smoother animation. And to make a slower, smoother animation is just going to take like 1,000 frames, something along those lines, which is fine just to let that run while you're having supper or something, but not, not while you're sitting watching it for it to happen.
Quick question. Would there
Yeah.
be any reason why my glass doors are not loading into my model? Because I did all the mullion grid things, and it's just like the doors don't exist, I guess. I don't know.
Are you looking for them on the door menu or um,
I tried to load them from the Autodesk family and the I guess the Revit folder family as well.
I'm having the same problem. I think what I did, and it didn't work either. I inserted him from the Autodesk family. It goes in there, but I cannot pop him in from the door
Yeah.
icon.
okay. Well,
Yeah.
the way they work is that um, the panels, the glass panels here,
Yeah.
uh, come in several flavors. There's glass panels, there's solid panels, there's empty panels, and there's door panels.
Hmm.
So the trick there will be, and we can go over this. Sort of once we get out of here, would be to select one of the, if you have used insert load family and loaded the curtain wall door panels into your model, and they're here. Then it's a question of selecting one of these panels and unpinning it, and then in properties switching it out for one of the panel types that's a door as opposed to a glass one. So we can go over it if you want.
Okay, I can try that.
Yeah.
My door, like usually if I were to, I don't know, do like a bench or something, it would show up and like I would search for it and it would be there, but that's not even happening. But I'm wondering if I do have to do that through properties instead.
Yes, they don't work like regular doors in
Okay.
terms of placing them. Okay, we're almost done here. Let's see if it worked out. Oh, and you can see here where we have the shadow out there on the ground plane. We that was set at the first floor level, so it just looked like it's going right on across. It's not some higher level or lower level. So that's good. Okay, well there's that. Let's take a look at this. Let's just see what happens. Okay, we're
I
still
just
going.
want to say I successfully saved the walkthrough to my computer.
All right. And you should just be able to find it on wherever you sort it and double click and out you go.
Yeah,
Well, you can see.
it's all good.
Okay, great. Good. Excellent. Um, and you can see when we play that we've got some there's some flicker going on, just because things change from one frame to the next. And the only way to get rid of that is to increase the number of frames so the difference from one frame to the next is less. That's just how that works out. Let's just play this one more time. Yeah, all this stuff happening over here just needs to be slower. But it looks pretty good, I gotta say, in terms of texture, lighting, that kind of stuff. Okay, get out of there. One of the drawbacks of this AVI format is that these end up being huge files. This is 500 megabytes, and it's an AVI file, which not all websites and that kind of stuff are going to be able to play. How many of you know about having an NVIDIA or an AMD graphics card in your computer?
I have one.
You ring a bell? Okay.
I
And
have
you'd be
one.
able to, let me save this here. Let me show you what that's going to get you. I'm going to go into Control Panel, Device Manager. That's where I want to be. And under Display Adapters, the one from Intel is in charge of the regular stuff that happens on the screen. And then this one from NVIDIA, there are a bunch of different models. And there's also a company called AMD that makes higher end graphics cards. These were initially developed to make games go much faster and more realistically, and have since become used for any number of applications, including AI. And what these can do without the advanced graphics hardware, which is just a circuit board that plugs into your computer somewhere, when Revit is calculating this scene, it has to go to each pixel and look to see if there's an object there. If so, what color is the object? What's it lit by? Is any other light shining on it? Is it transparent? Is it translucent? And has to do that for every single pixel in the final image, one by one. The NVIDIA cards can do is to do that for each of the pixels of the final image all at the same time. It's called parallel processing. And so instead of like one thing happening, it's just a bunch of them happen all at once. And so I'm done. I'll shoot this down. Let me show you the difference that can make. Here's a AVI file that Ali did last spring, I guess. And this was the interior of her project that they did there on West Broadway. And you can see just what she's going through. She didn't use the RPC plants, but she found some online that looked like this. And note that this is just the realistic visual style, not a rendered walkthrough. There's no lighting, there's no reflections. A true rendered walkthrough would have taken hours and hours. However, there's a program called Enscape that is an add-in to Revit, which can be used for still or animated renderings, where you take the same project and generate images that look like this. Reflections, lighting, smooth movement, and it takes about 10 minutes to generate this entire sequence. So that's a case where the time quality trade-off is skewed heavily if you put some money into it and get a laptop that includes one or a desktop that you can add one to. So this wasn't done as fast as just navigating through the space with Shift W, but with Enscape, you set up a similar sort of camera path and go basically through the same operations that we were doing. So it's a combination of the graphics hardware that can do it and the software that can take advantage of the graphics card. I have that installed on the computer at school. And one thing to consider is we ended up doing this on the computer at school, on the instructor's computer. We had to make sure to bring over all of her materials to be able to have them. We had to copy from her computer everything that went into the rendering onto the instructor's computer. So if you're just using Revit materials, that's fine, they're already there. But let's say if this were a custom marble instead of the custom brick, we need to make sure that we brought over that marble JPEG and told Revit where it was so it could see to do it. Anyway, I mean, this is a really nice way to look at stuff. Enscape comes with its own tools for defining the path and what direction the camera is looking and that kind of stuff. But it's just a good example of, so we got lights, we got skylights, we got, furniture on multiple layers, that kind of stuff. Reflections, multiple reflections, that kind of stuff. Break through the glass, come through. Sort of adjust to pick up the clouds there. Anyway, so if you have it, it's worth using, and it creates the MP4 files right off the bat. You don't have the AVI files in the middle. And with some setting up, we could do this on the instructor's computer if you don't have that capability on your own computer.